Jason said he had to let basketball go.
Yeah, let weightlifting go.
You were pushing it there, weren't you?
Yeah,
Where you on a scale of 1 to 10?
7.
Oh.
Yeah. Everybody ready? Good evening. I will now call to order Apex Town Council regular scheduled meeting for Tuesday, August 23rd, 2022, and also welcome those who've joined us by live stream. We'll get started as usual with our invocation. It's a tradition we have here for the town of Apex, and we value diversity and inclusion. We recognize that many people have different faiths, but we believe that this is a tradition that should continue in our town. So we do words of encouragement, reflection, and prayer. And tonight what I would like to do is talk about a young man who gave his life to our county and our state and our nation. And we just celebrated his life last Friday. Deputy Ned Byrd, and he had 13 years with the Wake County Sheriff's Office. Attended his service, and it was certainly an emotional service, but they talked about how he gave his life to our community. And we have many law enforcement officers who do that 24 hours a day. So I would like to take a moment of silence for Deputy Byrd and his family. Please join me in that. Thank you. If you're able, please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you so much. We'll now move to our consent agenda. All consent agenda items are considered routine to be enacted by one motion with the adoption of the consent agenda and without discussion. If a council member requests discussion of an item, the item may be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. And we have the consent agenda in front of us. Council, are there any changes?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I'd like to pull consent number 8, make that new business number 1.
All right. Councilman Haffey requests to move consent item 8 and make it new business 1. Any other? Okay, with that change as presented, is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve with moving consent agenda 8 to the new business 1.
All right, motion, Mayor Pro Tem, second. Second, Councilman Haffey. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, passed unanimously. All right, we'll now move to our presentations. And tonight we have a financial update, customer assistance program, and fiscal year end operating results presented tonight by Finance Director Vance Holloman. Mr. Holloman, good to see you tonight.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate this opportunity to address the council and the mayor. Tonight I'm just going to go briefly over some of the highlights concerning our customer assistance program and also talk a little bit about our year-end results. I have traditionally, when talking about the CAP, I've also talked a bit about the delinquencies that we have had during the period in which we were not cutting folks off and the amounts we have to collect. You have some information here that shows what occurred for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2022. Now, we have been working with our audit, and we were able to overcome some technical difficulties, and we made a write-off of some accounts right at the end of the year, which represented really an accumulation over more than just the current fiscal year. However, that's the period we were able to do the write-off. If you recall, I believe they were suspended late into fiscal year 21. We did make a small write-off at the end of fiscal year 21, and then this write-off. And that covers a large portion of what accumulated during that period where we were not cutting people off. So as you see there, just a little over $500,000 written off. That should be June 30, 2022. I apologize for that. Of course, the electric fund is the largest amount there. That's to be expected. They are the largest bills. In addition, the way we bill people, in order to cut their electric off should they not pay their full bill, electric is the last bill that gets paid if they make partial payments. So that's why you see the larger number there for electric, water next, and general, typically a smaller number. Our accounts that were 90 days past due after that write-off consisted of about $500,000. Following pretty much that same pattern, you have the electric fund, the largest portion of that, the general fund, smallest, and the water sewer fund, certainly not as large as the electric, but much more than the amount for the general fund. Now, these accounts that were 90 days or more past due, that represents our allowance for doubtful accounts that will appear in our audit report as of June 30, 2022. Except the general fund amount, general fund's so large and that amount's so small, we generally don't record that. That would only be $12,000. So we're looking at probably about $239,000 or so that's going to be shown as an allowance for doubtful account this June 30. A year ago, that amount approached, actually I think it was just a little over $1 million. So we in fact, that has come down considerably, some of that due to write-offs. The late write-off in 2021 was about $102,000. So between the two, you're looking at about $640,000 being written off. If you look at the revenues that we earned during that period of time from when the cutoff occurred through June 30, 2022, that represents only about just a little over, well, it's about 1/3 of a percent, 1/3 of 1% of all the revenues that were earned during that period. So even though it is a bit more than we traditionally have under normal circumstances, it still represented a fairly small amount of our revenues, and I think our funds still remain strong. If you look at the amount that's within the allowance for doubtful accounts, that's about 0.16% of the revenues earned during that period. So the two combined represent about 1/2 of 1% of the cumulative revenues earned from the date the cutoffs were suspended through June 30, 2020. So again, and while it is a bit larger number than we've had in the past, when you look at it, still not going to have a significant impact on the financial condition of our funds. Talk a little bit about our CAP awards, where we stand there. We've given out 327 awards through July 31st, over 144,000 given out. The limit for the award is $606. But it is based on what is actually owed at the time they apply, and we are actually not giving that out for each recipient. It's about $441. Again, we're going based on what their outstanding balance is at the time the award's made, and that's why that number is a bit lower. We had switched our eligibility determination method. I believe we switched it late in February. We've gone to a HUD-based method. As you can see there, we have been successful in the sense that the lowest income people are the ones that are getting the majority of the award, and that is good to see. And again, the number of people getting this, it is continuing to grow. We are now in a position where people were actually eligible after July 1 to apply for a second award. So the people who got this, I'm not sure. That's the awards made. It's possible there could be some repeats in there. I don't have that information. If we look at our available funds as of July 31, we had put about $549,000 in total in there. About, I believe, $503,000 of that was intended for actual awards, the remainder for administrative cost. When you put the awards and the amount we spent on eligibility determination through Western Wake, you'll see that we have in excess of $365,000 remaining. This is certainly appears to be very sufficient to get us through the current fiscal year. And then I think at that point in time, perhaps the council should consider not getting rid of the program, but maybe the program changing a bit to a point where it will be a set amount per year that's given out. When you look at, say, the Raleigh program upon which this was created, there's a set amount of money put out each year. Generally, people will come and get it, and within a couple of months, the full amount's gone. And again, we have got a large amount out here. At the time we started this program, it was really tough to have an idea how much people would need. But again, you know, we've gone through you know, quite a while now, and we've not let's see, we've not really even used a third of the money yet. So again, we may want next year, rather than continuing rolling these appropriations forward through purchase orders, we may want to consider, let's put a set amount in the budget for it, and it's there for people to come and get, and it will operate more as you would expect it to operate, say, in a traditional setting rather than an emergency situation like we encountered during COVID. We have some good news with our funds. As I look at these numbers, I want to caution you, they're preliminary. Well, they're not preliminary. They are, you know, late August. Now, some people think June 23rd is the longest day of the year, but June 30 is actually the longest day of the year, and it will not end until sometime in October. But we're moving along with it, and what we've got here are very positive results. When you look at our revenues for the general fund, consider that of the $85.9 million we had appropriated, $9.1 million of that represents fund balance appropriated, and you never get fund balance appropriated. It's in the bank, but it never comes in as the form of revenue during the course of the year. So when you consider that, we were anticipating getting about $76.8 million in revenues if we had gotten our full budgeted revenues, and we're in excess of that. So that's a very positive sign. Our taxes, good news on a couple of different fronts there. The property taxes, we came in about $850,000. That's our ad valorem, our traditionally collected real estate property taxes, as well as our motor vehicle taxes. We came in about $850,000 over there. Our sales tax is currently about $350,000 over. This reflects 11 months of sales tax. The August distribution has already been made, so there'll be one more distribution that will be included in this year's operating income. They've been running right at $1.5 million. So you're anticipating an additional about $1.5 million, barring something going unexpected. I'll also point out that in our intergovernmental, we're currently just a little bit below budget, but we do have an additional quarter of the utility sales tax left to come in, and that has been running anywhere from low 700s to mid 800s thousands. So we do anticipate, barring again, we don't have a bad quarter for that. We are anticipating the intergovernmental revenues will be over. So you're looking at potentially maybe as much as 2 or 2 to 2.5 in additional revenues coming in that we're aware of. In addition, our services and fees, our permits, and then our various charges, garbage fees, things of that nature, recycle, things of that nature, all came in very strong, pushing us over in that area. Miscellaneous, just a variety of things in there. Earnings rates did pick up a little bit later in the year, and we were very conservative on budgeting those. So again, the revenue figure looks very good. The expenditure figure also looks positive. You know, if you look at that, you'll see that our personnel, we expended about 93% of the budget. So that is certainly not a bad figure there. Operations were only a little over 2/3. Capital outlay were only about half. I want to disclose, in all fairness though, that there are significant encumbrances in those areas. Millions, about $3 million or so of encumbrances still left to be resolved. Now that has not been adjusted yet, except for accounts payable or payments that we made against the POs that were applicable to the year ending June 30, 2022. What will occur is we'll also work with budget and purchasing. We'll go through and close out a large number of those encumbrances. Now, some of them are for capital especially, good chance they'll get carried over. So when you look at the figure down there, almost 6.9 million, and we're talking about we've got another potentially 2 to 2.5 to come in. That won't represent our change in available fund balance though. and that is something we key off of as far as our level of reserves and things of that nature. That will simply be the difference between revenues and expenditures for the year. But if outstanding encumbrances will, the change in outstanding encumbrances will tend to change that a bit, and we won't know what those figures are till a bit later. But again, when you look at this, I think it's safe to say we'll have a very positive year in the general fund. Again, a few more expenses may be adjusted, things of that nature, but we're thinking this looks very, very good. Good one to go out on. Now, the electric operating fund results, the results of operation was a little bit tighter here, and our expenditures to budget were a little bit tighter in electric than they have traditionally been. Sales revenues did look good, and other revenues also. Some of our capital outlay charges, things of that nature, made us look good there. We had a minimal amount of fund balance appropriated there. Purchases for resale did go over the budget, and that is really what made the budget tight in that fund, because it is such a large part of the budget. When it gets at 103%, that puts a little bit of tightness on the rest of the budget. But we are below in capital outlay. Transfers are a bit below 2, debt service right in line. Contingency was appropriated in case additional funds were needed, was not expended. So that gave us a little bit of cushion in the budget. The electric fund has a very small encumbrance amount. I think it's approximately about $500,000. So that won't have, couldn't potentially have as dramatic effect as, say, the general fund would have. So I feel we are going to end the year positive in the electric fund. Maybe not by quite as much as we have in other funds or in prior years, but still positive. Again, the write-off also had an impact on that. When you look at the change in the in those allowances for uncollectible accounts being much lower this year, and that write-off, they didn't totally wipe each other out, but the fund didn't take a $500,000 hit from that as a result of those changes. I suspect maybe $100,000 to $200,000. Water sewer also, it looks very positive. Has a very healthy result there. Now, we may have some additional expenditures there. We're in the partnerships with Cary, and we may be getting some additional invoices from them for a few things. But things did look good. Our sales revenue was higher than anticipated. Purchases for resale to generate that excess revenue were actually smaller than we had anticipated. In our operations, we stayed in line. Capital outlay, we have about $1.5 million of encumbrances in this fund. So again, that could have some slight effect. Also want to say about the electric and the water sewer, when you, as I know, you'll anxiously one day get your audit report and go in to look at the statements. When you look at the electric and the water sewer funds up front, that will not look exactly like this. Some of the numbers will look the same, but many will look different. Those numbers you see there, that's the combined water sewer fund, which would include our capital reserve funds, include our operating fund, include our capital project funds. For the electric fund, it will include our operating fund as well as our capital project fund. So there'll be some numbers that look similar, but they'll also be a number that look quite different. So in summary there, I believe we've had a very positive year financially. Some impact from COVID and some impact from the write-offs, but overall, things have gone very well.
Okay. Thank you, sir, for a thorough report as usual. Questions before we move on? From
Could you
council? Go ahead.
Could you go back to the general fund?
Expenditures or revenues?
Let's start with the expenditures.
Yes, sir. We're
Well,
there.
I guess the bottom line here that people, the takeaway is, and correct me if I'm wrong, we started the year, we budgeted expecting to appropriate about $9 million from our fund balance to cover our general
Yes, sir,
fund.
and that's on the revenue side.
And what we end up doing is, instead of appropriating $9 million from the fund, we're gonna transfer back $8.5 million modules, some encumbrances, maybe another $3 million. So we're gonna transfer back $5 million into the general fund. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
So that's a huge swing.
As you see there on this, on these
In
expenditure
the good direction,
statements.
in the good direction, but still.
Yes, sir. But the 14 million difference between budget and expenditures are a large part of it. But again, there are a few million of encumbrances in there, but that won't offset it completely,
Yeah.
by no means. And then we were about $1.5 million over if you exclude the impact of well, fund balance, which we'll not receive. For actual revenues, we were about $1.5 million over.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. And I think the one thing that jumps out here, besides just the bottom line result, is the operations budget came in, it looks like 33% underneath our expected operations for the general fund. Like, how did we do that?
Well, there are some encumbrances out there also.
In operations
Have
of those?
some impact, yes, sir.
Okay. The other encumbrances were mostly in capital outlay, like projects.
Well, they're both. There's some in both. Yes, sir. But again, it's, it is, well, I think what this indicates, one is that we conservatively budget revenues, which is a positive thing for a unit of government to do, because you certainly can get yourself in trouble if you overestimate your revenues. And then secondly, we're not conservative when we estimate our expenditures. We budget what we believe it will take, and through positive management, good budgetary practices, if we get in a situation where we are, we have a huge amount of budget at the end of the year, we're not rushing out and trying to spend it all before June 30 or anything like that. We're being good stewards of the public's money and having these, these amounts below budget in expenditures.
Yeah, and I understand, Mayor, you sent an email last week. We got some good news from the census about, is that right?
I think it's still.
Oh, it's still pending?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Yeah, don't want to speak out on that yet.
All right.
We still had a very strong year in sales tax, even with the lower number for population. Yes.
I got a question, Mr. Holloman. Are you finished, Mr. Hack?
I was just going to wrap up and say this is a great bottom line result for the town, and the citizens should feel happy we got someone like Vance
Yes.
at the helm here.
Well, that's very kind. Thank you.
I would agree. You mentioned about with our customer assistance program, maybe considering a set amount moving forward. Would you have a recommendation as to what to consider?
Well, it might be tough. I mean, we've been in a little over a year, and we're doing about 144, probably something in the 50 to 100 range. Probably have to see how the rest of this year goes, get an idea, something like that, and set that out there. I mean, I think if you put 50, you might not overdo it. If you put 100, you probably would have extra. Something in that ballpark.
Thank you.
And there may well be enough from this unexpended appropriation to carry over, to cover that the next year.
Thank you.
Any other questions from council? Okay. All right, before you sit down, I know you're coming back for another public hearing item, but I do want to recognize you. You said this is your last one, right?
Yes, sir. Last
man.
council meeting.
You sure?
Yes, sir. August 31.
See why you're so happy?
Yeah, no, exactly. No, I just want to recognize you. 7.5 years with the town of Apex, and you came from the LGC, a lot of experience there, and the work that you have done. And we talked about awards, and we have award space here, but we don't have room for the awards that we receive because of your leadership. And I want to thank you for that. And I would say, looking at you in the finance industry, I would probably say you're the Michael Jordan of the finance industry. I knew you would like the Michael Jordan because you're a Jordan fan. But
Well, that's very
you've
kind,
done
Mayor.
an amazing job. So I want to give council members an opportunity to chime in on that and just speak about your work here. Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, I just want to say, it's thanks to your meticulous skills. You're responsible for the town of Apex being, winning as many awards as your department has, and making sure that the accounting of everything that goes on in the town is well presented to the citizens. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just add. I mean, when you say it's your last meeting, are you working tomorrow, or are you like looking at your watch ready to get a week or something?
31st.
Okay, all right. Well, to build on what I just said, you've done a fantastic job. You come up here, you explain the numbers, you make it in a way that we can all understand, that people can understand what's going on, laying out the financial situation of the town, and the performance speaks for itself. The awards, it's amazing. So thank you so much for your service to the town. Sorry you're going.
Thank you.
All right, Councilman Gray.
And I also want to say thank you so much for all that you've done. It's an understatement to emphasize our role as appropriate fiscal stewards for the taxpayers' money. And you play a key role in that. And when we look at not just the awards, but year after year after year, we're able to take a look at our financial stability and understand that's in safe hands. And a lot of that has been due to you and your hard work. So I will echo the comments of all of those on the council. I will say not only Michael Jordan, but, you know, you're probably our Alexander Hamilton.
Oh, I like that.
I don't think I'm going to shoot anyone, but.
If you do, aim left.
But,
But, you know, there's still time,
Honest to
31st.
yes, sir. Still got a few days there.
Councilwoman Stallings.
Oh, just thank you so much, Mr. Holloman. I echo my colleagues, just the sincere thanks and gratitude. Like Councilmember Gray said, being financial stewards, being good stewards of our finances and our taxpayers' money is so important. And you've been in such a tremendous leadership role, and we just really appreciate you. We're going to miss you, but thank you so much for your service to our town and to our residents. We appreciate you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Certainly deserving of a standing ovation for your work.
If I could just take a moment, I want to thank council for all your support and administration, and also my coworkers. I've always been very proud to tell people that I was the finance director of Apex, North Carolina, and I thank you for that opportunity.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank
You can't leave yet, though. We got a public hearing you want you. All right, we'll move now to regular meeting agenda. Are there any additional agenda items for the agenda before we set it? Hearing none, is there a motion?
I'm so moved.
Motion, Councilman Gray.
I second it.
All right, second, Councilwoman Stallings. Thank you. All right, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion passed unanimously. We have a set meeting agenda. We now move to a public forum. This allows the public an opportunity to address the town council. The speaker is requested to not address items that appear as a public hearings schedule on the regular agenda. You have 3 minutes to speak, and we will not be responding to you, but we support everything that you present to us as we continue to get better in what we do. So we'll go to the list tonight, and we have Elizabeth Stitt, if you would come up.
Good evening. Elizabeth Stitt, 3113 Friendship Road. Mayor and Town Council. It's very nice to be back in front of you guys. I was out of the country for a couple of weeks, and when they say there's no place like home, I'm here to tell you there's no place like home. I normally have a lot to talk about, but I've been told we need to be really short tonight. So I wanted to just call out the participation policy. Normally, the meetings are very open and inclusive, but there's been a few times where there has been some comments that I have found to be hateful and uncomfortable and disrespectful. And if you look at the participation policy, there's a sentence around that at the very bottom. So I would just like for the council to consider to move that statement up top and maybe bold it, because some of the comments around our LGBTQ community is hard to listen. And as you know, I'm coming on a regular basis, and I just wanted to share that it's hard to listen to that. So if there's a way that we can update the policy and move it up to try to remind people that this is a place for everybody, and even though we disagree on things, and yes, I disagree with you guys and you disagree with me, we still need to be respectful of each other through the process. Words do matter, so I ask that you consider making some changes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Stitt. All right, that closes out our public forum. And we move now to public hearings. And we have public hearing 1, 2022 general obligation bond extension, 15 million street and sidewalk improvement bonds. Mr. Vance Holloman.
Okay, well, I've got my voice back now, so. Thank you. Tonight's public hearing will precede a potential motion by council to extend to adopt an order that will extend the bond order, the life of the bond order for the 2015 $15 million street and sidewalk bonds. Those bonds were approved by voters on November 3rd, 2015, and under general statutes, they will expire November 3rd, 2022. However, statutes also permit local governments to receive an extension of up to 3 years, which will push this out to 2025. The Local Government Commission, at their July 12, 2022 meeting, did in fact approve the town's request to do that. So what's necessary at this point in time is if there is approval of that order, the town will need to publish the order and its adoption, and citizens would have a period of 30 days to object to the procedures, not object to the bonds per se being extended, but make an objection concerning the procedures that were followed for extending the life of the bonds. And that would be published, if this in fact passes, that would be published in this Friday's News and Observer, and the 30-day countdown would start Friday.
Okay. Any questions? All right, hearing none, we'll go ahead and open up the public hearing for speakers to comment, and we have no one signed up to speak tonight, so we'll close public hearing for comment, and it's back to council for discussion.
So we need an order to approve the bond extension, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. Extension of the bond. Yes, ma'am, we do.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll make a motion that we approve the bond extension.
All right, motion, Mayor Pro Tem.
Second.
Second, Councilman Mahaffey. Any other discussion? All right, we take a vote. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion passed unanimously. Thank you again, Mr. Holliday.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move now to public hearing 2, annexation number 733, Adams Property PUD. Tonight by Liz Lofton.
Good evening. So this is public hearings 2 and 3, annexation 733, and rezoning case 22 CZ08 Adams Property PUD. This project is located in the western part of our jurisdiction. It is on the east side of New Hill Olive Chapel Road. To the south is Olive Ridge, which is under construction, and to the east is the retreat at Friendship, formerly known as Heelan Tract. This property is currently in Wake County's jurisdiction. The property is currently zoned Wake County R40W. The applicant is proposing to rezone to Plan Unit Development Conditional Zoning. The 2045 land use map designates the property as low-density residential, and the proposed rezoning is consistent with the land use map. The site consists of 5 parcels totaling 23.92 acres. The property contains 2 single-family homes, several accessory structures, 2 existing ponds, and 1 stream with a riparian buffer. The applicant conducted a neighborhood meeting on March 29th. A full list of the proposed uses is on page 2 of the staff report and includes single-family and accessory apartment. The applicant is proposing a maximum density of 66 units or 2.8 units per acre. A full list of the proposed setbacks are listed on page 2 of the staff report. A full list of the zoning conditions proposed can be found on page 3 of the staff report. I would like to point out the applicant has added zoning condition number 10. Construction traffic shall be prohibited from utilizing Twin Ponds Lane. The developer may erect barrier or barriers to prevent access to Twin Pond lanes during construction. A table showing the proposed buffers is on page 3 of the staff report. The applicant is proposing a 20-foot type B buffer along the northern property, a 10-foot type B along the southern Olive Ridge, along the western boundary, a 20-foot type B and a 100-foot type E. Along the eastern boundary, which is the retreat at Friendship, a 10-foot minimum with a 30-foot average type B buffer is proposed. The applicant is proposing to meet the RCA requirements in the UDO. The town of Apex will provide town services to this project. A full list of the architectural conditions can be found on page 4 of the staff report. The conditions are generally consistent with what we see for residential. A maximum building height proposed is 45 feet or 3 stories. The proposed PUD is consistent with the Apex Transportation Plan and Bicycle Pedestrian System Plan. Connectivity to adjacent communities will be coordinated with existing or planned right-of-way to the retreat at Friendship, which is their future Phase 10, in Olive Ridge to the south. Opportunities for future connection have been shown west to New Hope Farm Road and to the residential properties to the west. A TIA was performed as part of this PUD, and based on the TIA and staff review, a condition has been added that the developer shall pay a fee in lieu in the amount of $25,000 towards the cost of design, right-of-way acquisition, and installation of future traffic signal at the intersection of Hume Olive Road and New Olive Chapel Road prior to platting 80% of the lots. Sidewalks will be provided on both sides of the street. The bicycle and pedestrian systems map shows a 10-foot side path along the eastern side of New Hill Olive Chapel Road, which the project area has approximately 30 linear feet. This project will not construct the side path along the frontage and instead will make a payment in lieu. This project does not include any additional affordable housing units over the 23 units that were committed in the original Heelan and Friendship Station PUD. A summary of the applicant's justification and the housing staff's recommendation can be found on page 6 of the staff report. A letter of impact from Wake County Public School Systems was received for this rezoning and is included in the packet. Wake County indicates that elementary, middle, and high school within the current assignment area are anticipated to have insufficient capacity for future students. School expansion or construction within the next 5 years may address concerns at the elementary and high school grade levels. The Environmental Advisory Board held a meeting with the applicant on February 17th. The zoning conditions suggested by the EAB are listed on pages 6 and 7 of the staff report, along with the applicant's response to each of the conditions. The Parks and Rec Advisory Commission reviewed this project at their May 25th meeting. The commission made a recommendation for a fee in lieu of dedication with credit for construction of greenway if an opportunity is identified at the time of master subdivision plan review and approval. Planning Board held this rezoning at their August 8th meeting and unanimously recommended approval with the conditions as proposed by the applicant. Planning staff can recommend approval of the rezoning with the conditions as offered by the applicant. The proposed rezoning is reasonable in the public interest in that the density, use, and architectural conditions are consistent with those to the south and east. I can answer any questions that you may have, and the applicant is also here.
Thank you, Ms. Lofton. Are there any questions for Ms. Lofton? All right, here are none. All right, applicant, if you would step up, thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Gilbert, Mayor Pro Tem Killingsworth, and members of the Town Council. My name is Neil Ghosh. I'm an attorney with the Morningstar Law Group at 700 West Main Street in Durham. I'm representing MI Homes for this rezoning, and we also have a few members of our team present. And as always, thank you, Ms. Lofton, for your presentation on the project. So as was mentioned, this project is on about 24 acres, and what MI is proposing here is a residential community consisting of single-family homes, single-family detached homes. We are requesting up to 66 homes. So on this acreage, that equates to a density of under 3 dwelling units per unit, under 3 dwelling units per acre, which is consistent with the comprehensive plan. If you are familiar with this area, then you probably realize that this acreage is adjacent to the existing Heelan PUD, which MI Homes also is building. This project essentially is the next phase of Heelan. As another phase of Heelan, MI plans to build the same single-family homes which have done so well in that community. The project actually borrows the same architectural conditions from Heelan. Those are adopted as part of this rezoning as well. As far as the layout, we did share a concept plan at the neighborhood meeting. I believe that's in your agenda packet. There are only 2 points of access. One is to the Olive Ridge subdivision to the south, and another is on the north side of the assemblage adjacent, on New Hope Farm Road. Importantly, there is no connection proposed or access point proposed to New Hill Olive Chapel Road. If you're looking at the plan here on the screen, the tax parcel shows this leg, that's Twin Ponds Lane essentially. We're not using that. So it's part of the tax parcel. The condition that we have added in that regard was in response to some neighborhood concern. We will not be accessing that for the construction of this project. We also are doing a fee in lieu of the small portion of the side trail here because it wouldn't really make sense to do otherwise. And also that's because then construction traffic would be there. The condition also speaks to barriers that could be erected. We were thinking probably in this location so that these folks could continue using it. But, we would be open to putting that barrier if one is necessary based on whatever those property owners think would be beneficial to them. So I mentioned we have by zoning condition prohibited construction traffic from utilizing Twin Pond lanes. So despite the size of this project, we actually were required to do a TIA, and that's not because of the volume generated by this project alone. It more has to do with the cumulative impacts from a few projects in the area. This was a town requirement, not NCDOT, and in fact, after reviewing the TIA, NCDOT did not recommend any improvement for this project. Nevertheless, we do recognize the importance of traffic infrastructure and have committed to providing funds to go towards the improvement of Hume Olive and New Hill Olive Chapel Road so that eventually whenever an improvement at that intersection gets triggered, it wouldn't all fall on the shoulders of one developer. After a robust discussion, we did receive a unanimous recommendation of approval from the planning board, and so we're hoping to have your support here tonight. We're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Ghosh.
Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Ghosh? All right, thank you. All right, we'll go ahead and open up public hearing for comment for both items. And first person to speak tonight is Bill Jensen. You would state your name and address, please, sir, for the record.
Okay, this is Bill Jensen, and my address is 1005 South Wellensburg Place in Apex. Excuse me. The Apex Environmental Review Board requests improvements on projects from developers. Often, the majority of the requests are ignored. I will discuss the situation with MI Homes and the Adams development. The Environmental Review Board asked MI Homes to initiate the replacement of forced canopy that will be removed by the Adams development. The request was ignored. The board requested that 5 homes out of the 66 be constructed would have solar PV installed. That is less than 1 home in 13. MI Homes ignored this request. MI Homes even ignored a request for a sign to be installed promoting solar energy. A similar sign is installed on another development in Apex. Some developers will say that solar PV systems cost too much. They don't. A 4 kilowatt, 10 panel solar PV system costs less than $10,000 after the federal tax credit is taken. A 4 kilowatt system will provide an energy savings of about $600 per year. This results in a rate of return of over 6% per year, making the cost of home ownership with solar lower than without. And it gets even better the larger the solar PV system is. Some developers will tell you people are not interested in solar energy, but they are interested. For example, the Courtyard on Holt development has installed 12 solar PV systems in a subdivision that will have 89 homes. This is over 13% of the planned homes, and they are still building. By asking MI Homes to install solar PV systems on less than 10% of the homes in Adams, possibly the Environmental Review Board is asking for too little. Climate change is real and getting worse, and we all need to do whatever we can to reduce the tragedy that is unfolding before our eyes. By reducing energy requirements of homes through smart construction and energy production, the world will be a better place for our children, and homeowners will save money. Situations like this bring to mind what President John Kennedy said: "Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country." This statement also applies to the world. I trust that the Apex Town Council will help MI Homes embrace what John Kennedy said. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jensen. All right, next to speak is Ellen Conway.
Hello.
Hello.
Ellen Conway, 3268 Bellamy Ridge Drive. I'm here to echo what Ms. Lofton said about the imbalance of residential development and our school capacity. So the Adams property, from what I can see on the Wake County School website, will be assigned to the Apex Friendship Schools. The middle school and high school are already capped. The elementary school is brand new and full, but not yet capped. Surely it will be very soon. The kids of this new development will have to be bused elsewhere, as well as the kids and families of the hundreds of other homes that are planned to be built in Apex in the next couple of years. So just to show you why this matters, my daughter and several others in my neighborhood, Lake Castleberry, are assigned to Mills Park. That school has been capped, for a decade maybe? It's not been addressed. My daughter now is bused to West Cary. Her pickup time this year is 5:30 in the morning. She will be getting up at 4:45 in the morning to catch a bus and then be on that bus for an hour and 17 minutes. So school capacity really affects children. She's not being set up for learning. It affects the families with this ridiculous transportation across the county. So while I understand that the Adams development is consistent with your 2045 land use plan, it's not good for families, it's not good for children. So I'm here to ask that it be delayed or denied until there's sufficient school capacity for our children. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Conway. All right, that closes out comment period for these two items, and it's back to council for discussion. Take it away.
You want to start?
Look at me. You want to go?
I can.
All right, go for it.
I mean, I am concerned about what the Environmental Advisory Board suggested and what is not being added by this project. So I'm concerned about that. I'm also concerned that I don't understand about the affordable housing. I don't know if you want to speak to that. I know we have an affordable housing fund as well that I know some developers in the past have contributed to. So I'm curious if you'd like to speak to those.
Sure, thank you for the opportunity. So first of all, I will just state there were several recommendations from the Environmental Advisory Board. I don't know how many, and this project implemented a majority of them, by far a majority of them. There were some that were not implemented, and a few of those that were discussed. One of them tonight, a few of them that were discussed tonight, one of them was related to the tree canopy. Now, Ms. Lofton is here. I believe she was at the EAB meeting. That condition specifically was, staff indicated was onerous, very difficult to comply with, and not recommended by staff. And that's because it requires you to identify every tree on the property at the outset. It also requires the town to understand how many trees that is. So it's a very difficult condition to comply with. We're complying with the UDO as far as tree canopy and recognize that tree canopy is important. This project actually ends up saving a lot of these environmental areas. This area over here remains untouched, where there's no stream crossing. So from an environmental standpoint, this project does very well. But from a zoning commitment standpoint about tree canopy, yeah, the condition that the EAB asked for is simply not something that we felt we could do. It's also something that staff did not recommend. With respect to solar panels on these properties, the way this site sets up is, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious from here. And there is a concept plan that was shared at the neighborhood meeting. I believe it's in your agenda packet. So generally speaking, the rows are running north-south through here. There are almost no homes, no lots in this community which will have roofs with southern exposure. Now, the cost of the solar PV systems, I understand what the speaker said earlier, Mr. Jensen said, the real numbers from MI, and this is MI Homes. I think you guys are familiar with MI Homes. They've built homes in Apex. They've actually implemented solar, and they were one of the first, if not the first developer to commit to actual affordable housing units for home ownership opportunities in their projects. That's MI Homes. So it's not that they're opposed to any of this stuff. But the cost to MI Homes to implement solar on a house is near $20,000 per house. So it didn't seem to make sense to MI to commit to some arbitrary number of homes in this community, which has very few opportunities for effective solar PV systems on these homes, because there are only a few lots at most that that could actually end up having roofs with that southern exposure, which is very important for the solar implementation. They have committed to providing the conduit on every home, which I think is an important point. It actually gives homeowners an opportunity to add solar if that is something that they are interested in after the fact, which also, from our understanding, is kind of beneficial with the solar tax credit. It applies to homeowners, who are putting solar panels on their homes. Not exactly sure how it applies to a new construction community or new construction home, but certainly MI doesn't benefit from our reading or our understanding from that type of a program. So, I think it's actually makes more sense here for there to be the solar conduit, and then have each homeowner can identify whether it actually makes sense to put solar on their property. Particularly in this community, the way the streets align and therefore the lots align.
Okay.
And did you want to address the affordable housing question?
Oh, yeah, thank you. Sorry about that. On the affordable housing front, we actually spent a lot of time with CJ, who I don't see here, on that point. And, ultimately, after working through the pro forma with CJ's recommendation was that, it didn't really make sense to have an affordable housing unit in this community. And that's in part due to how small it is, but also in consideration of the fact that MI Homes has, before there was any notion of any kind of developer incentive for affordable housing, has previously committed to doing a number of affordable housing units for ownership opportunities in the town. I mean, this is something that they have done and will do in the future. But on those other projects, they have found success in providing affordable housing ownership opportunities in their townhome product. This is a single-family community. It's much harder to implement, and in fact, we didn't think it would be possible, and staff agreed.
And you are aware we have a housing affordability fund.
I actually am aware of that, but when we talked about that with staff, I wasn't aware that was still
My understanding is we're no longer able
Yeah.
to accept that as
Is that
it's
true?
in the staff report at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's what we were told.
Any other questions for Ms. Ghosh?
I do have a question. And it's related to your comment about the conduits within the homes. So can you enlighten me as to why, if you're going to put in conduits, you're not going to put, I mean, it seems like the signs are a simple request.
The signs?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
walk me through this, because you used the word an arbitrary number of homes, and I think that's an interesting phrasing, because I'm trying to figure out what's arbitrary, and if you could help me out understand.
Yeah, so the number of homes isn't
I'm sorry,
arbitrary.
hold on, allow me to finish my question. I'm just concerned about what you meant by an arbitrary number of homes when you said that, and then you went on to discuss the conduits. So I'm trying to get an understanding of the relationship between the arbitrary number of homes, what you mean by that, what we're looking at in terms of the conduit, and then, if you wouldn't mind rolling that into an explanation about why signs talking about solar options is not available.
Okay, so the number of homes isn't necessarily arbitrary, but the way the condition is set up in Apex, you have to identify the lots on which, like where the solar would be required. So at this point, that's arbitrary because we don't know. I mean, there's not enough lots here where we can say for certain that we'll be able to hit that number. And the additional component of that is the additional cost to the house. So the conduit, and I think this answers the second part of your question, the conduit would be, I think, is a benefit at time of construction for anyone who wants to add solar later, and for those lots which, where maybe it makes sense off the bat to have solar because of the way the house sets up on the lot. The conduit is already there. I think that makes a lot of sense. The signage, so at the time of the EAB meeting, that was requested, and it referred to an attachment. The attachment wasn't there on the EAB recommended conditions. So we did not agree to put signs, which we had no idea what they were. The condition refers to an attachment. I think in the staff report it's written that way, is referred to attachment. There's no attachment. I don't know where these signs would go. I can't say that we're fundamentally opposed to putting signs up for solar options, but it wasn't something we could agree to. We didn't even know what it was that we would have been agreeing to. I think that answers all the parts of your question.
So you weren't aware of the request for signage?
No, we were aware of the request.
Okay.
The condition refers to, it's at signs like those in the attached. There was nothing attached. We never saw the sign.
You good, sir?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. First point, we're not allowed to consider the applicant or the owner when they come forward with rezoning and previous situations and stuff you've applied for. They've made several references to other projects which have had various commitments. I think that's great, and I thank you guys for that, but that's not applicable here. This is not an amendment to a previous PUD. This is a new PUD. So let's get that out there. I'm disappointed that we're not seeing more uptake of the recommendations from the Environmental Review Board that we have in place in Apex. It's important to me to be a leader in environmental building here in Apex and environmental development. This development here is a prime example where we can make a significant difference. Every significant request that was made from the board by you guys was denied. Tree canopy is very important. This is 100% covered lot, right? We'll be clearing 65% at least. I realize there's an issue with identifying caliper of trees. There's other stuff we've done in the past. We've done it based just on the tree canopy cover as an area. You can take a shot of it and calculate how much. There's other stuff you can do, other conditions we've done in the past. Lack of solar on single-family homes is a non-starter for me going forward for everyone. I think the number should be 100% of homes. I'm willing to accept a lot less, and I'm willing to wait for someone to make a bigger contribution than zero. The other big thing is I think every garage that we build, and I know this is something that was discussed at the planning board with staff, they should all include the ability to have plug-in level 2 chargers in them, because EVs are going to be the future. They're the present, actually. So I don't know why. I don't want to build any more garages that don't have chargers for these. And I know there's some issue about that being conditioned. Well, let's figure it out, because I want to see that bit there. So as it stands, I'm not going to support the project.
Could I address?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so with the EV charging station, I mean, Mr. Jensen was the one who brought that up at the EAB board. Staff stepped in and said that that condition, the original one, was that the charging outlet be inside the garage. And staff informed the EAB that that type of condition wasn't enforceable, as it requires something on the interior of the house or interior of the structure, and that's something that they don't have the ability to, I guess, police. And so the condition was changed to suggest that the charging outlet be on the exterior of the garage, which at the time, even Mr. Jensen said, that's not ideal, but if that's the only thing that the town can regulate, then I guess that's the way it should be written. So even after acknowledging that it's not ideal, he made the recommendation. We agree it's not ideal. It's something that MI Homes can implement inside the garage, but it's not enforceable by the town. I don't know how to respond to that, but, you know, in that sense, based on the guidance that we had so far, I believe our hands are tied. I mean, I don't think anyone wants the charging port on the outside of the garage.
I concur, but I think you could commit to doing on the inside of the garage verbally, or, I mean, you could put it as a zoning condition and they could not necessarily have to check it. I don't know, like, it's not expensive, it's simple. I'm not an expert in how this works, and I would ask staff to come forward with us with a way we can make it work, because I'm not interested in any homes being done without the level 2 charges in the garage.
I mean, we'll commit to it. I think that we were told that we couldn't commit to it, but we'll commit to it.
Okay,
A charging station inside each garage.
sure. I appreciate that. It still leaves the issue of the solar.
Let me ask you how I mean, what is it that you're asking on?
20% of the homes having solar panels installed, I would think would be sufficient for a project like this.
All right, and let me talk to my client about that.
Can I say something real quick?
Absolutely.
And Councilman Happy, I understand where we're trying to go, but what my concern is, if we're going to work with development community, we need to give them an advance notice and say, here's our plan forward. I just have a hard time putting this on the first developer that comes with us without the solar. And we also have staff here who made the recommendation. I get where we're trying to go, but we got to give them an opportunity to get there with us. So that's my input to that.
And my response, Mayor, is that this is not now. Like, we created an environmental review board specifically to not have these conversations.
Right. Okay.
I do have one other question, and this might be more applicable for Mr. Jensen to answer the question of. Mr. Jensen, can you tell me, or do you know offhand, I see in our staff report that talks about 5 of 62 homes being recommended. Was that the number you guys were asking for? 5 of 62?
Asked for 5 of the 66, I think was, yeah.
Okay. So 5 of 66, okay. It's just 5 homes.
Just 5 homes, it's less than 10%.
Thank you.
May I say one other thing regarding
Come on.
orientation?
Come on.
Just really briefly, there's a government program that tells you how much generation you're going to get out of a system, and I ran it for east-west orientation and south orientation. And it turned out to be, for a 20% slope roof, you get 85% of the production on an east-west roof as you get on a south roof. So east-west roofs are actually not too bad at all, depending on the slope. If I may, I'd like to say I got the numbers that I used in terms of costs from a solar installer. I didn't generate those myself. So I think they're accurate for today. I'm sure that MI Homes, when they did theirs before, maybe the solar costs were a lot higher than that, or their overhead is high, I don't know. But today, that's what the costs were presented to me from a installer.
Is that a
Thank you.
local installer, Mr. Jensen? A local installer?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you.
Pardon me? Who asked that question?
Up here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay, that's okay. I said it was a local
You're a
installer.
ventriloquist. Yes, it is. It's an installer that works out of Cary.
Thank you.
If I can add, while we're in discussion, as we move forward, I know we have the opportunity to meet with developers to discuss a project. I would hope that encourage the council to present their thoughts and concerns and what they would like to see at that time. I think it'll help with the direction we're trying to go. I think that's very beneficial to everyone, because it doesn't put the development community on the spot, and they got to make a decision here.
Okay.
I get where we're trying to go, but I just want to make sure they are given an opportunity to weigh in.
Well, my response, Mr. Mayor, is the first time I heard from this team was yesterday morning. I got an email from Neil,
Okay.
and I responded right away with the things I just said.
Same.
And I didn't hear
I
back
need more
after that.
notice too. I only got a 2-day notice, so my schedule's very busy.
That's
And
fair.
I've let them know my concerns, which have already been stated by the council.
Mhm.
That's fair. Councilman, you had another, Councilman Gray? I'm sorry.
No,
Oh, okay.
no.
All right. Any other discussion? All right, so we have the two
Gotta
public hearings.
respond.
Oh, you want to respond to?
Yes, following up on Mr. Mahaffey's request, I was able to talk to my client, and I think, we would commit to the EAB recommendation, 5 homes on the site. Looking at it, we've had our solar consultant look at this. We think there are 4 lots that would be ideal, most ideal, I guess, for solar. But we're just not sure that 20% of the lots are gonna be really great investment for solar based on the way they're oriented. But we would agree to what the EAB originally recommended, 5 homes with solar, at a 4 kilowatt system, I believe.
Okay.
I'm still a no. I mean, you haven't addressed the tree canopy cover.
On that, I would just ask if staff could respond to that, because the indication we got, and actually, you mentioned there was some other condition related to this. I mean, this condition, I think, was very onerous, the way it, essentially you have to identify every tree on the site ahead of time to understand what is required here.
So, I mean, there's tree surveys there's people you can hire to do tree surveys and identify them for you. I disagree that it's onerous, but to your point about other options, we've had tree canopy replacement done by area, by taking a survey. You take the satellite shot, you say, okay, what % is covered tree canopy? What is our landscape plan going to replace it? What's the delta there? How can we come up with a difference in that delta? There have been fee and lieu, or you could plant offsite, or you could donate to a tree planting charity for whatever it would cost to replace. That are conditions we've done before.
And my understanding is there's donations to other organizations my understanding is that staff is not.
So we have had zoning conditions like that in the past. I don't know what the current status of donations to tree we have. Okay.
Councilman Mahaffey, if I can interrupt, if it's all right with the developer, is this something that staff can handle outside of the meeting and then follow up at the next meeting
Well,
to get your questions answered?
So we don't have any way of doing a calculation right here on the fly, so I don't know how to answer your question. I also would be interested in getting some more, I don't know what the condition is that you're thinking of, but if you have some suggested language or the concept, I think that would be useful, and I think we could come back next month. Can we get the date certain on that?
Is it good for that?
13th. Our next meeting is September 13th.
Is that already?
If that will suffice for you all, we can follow up with you all and be prepared for the 13th.
Or the 27th, if you'd.
One sec.
Yeah, 13th is already,
Usually the second meeting is packed, right?
yeah.
We do have a long agenda.
Yeah,
for the next meeting. Yeah.
13th.
For the-
13th or 27th.
What's, I don't even know today's date. The 13th.
13th.
The next meeting is the 27th. That's the one that we have a,
13th and 13th is pretty heavy.
okay. Well, it's up to you all. I just want to make sure that staff has time to discuss it and
Yeah,
and
that's a
get
good
you all the
idea.
answers.
If I understood correctly, that date would be September 27th?
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So what we'll do, if you could work with Ms. Lofton, we'll make sure we get the questions from council and get those back to you.
Okay. Thank you.
I would also agree with Councilmember Mahaffey. We need time to set a meeting to actually discuss things instead of 2 days' notice. Because then we could discuss all these things beforehand, become a little more prepared to the meeting to address the concerns.
Sure.
That's good.
And Mayor, if I may just make one comment, because I understand and can appreciate the frustration from those who are applicants coming before us, because they, from my standpoint, just me speaking for me, I detest the negotiation that takes place. I think it creates legal risk. I think it creates cost risks. I think it makes it very difficult for all of us to do our job. So I'm very appreciative of the impact that, the back and forth, and I don't like doing it. I feel like when you guys come in, talk to us, that should be, all right, we know what's coming on. Staff should be able to give us a solid recommendation so that we're not negotiating here at table. I think that doesn't help anybody. But with that said, I do think that when we are presented with matters, I know that from a standpoint, at least from my view from the board, we have set various priorities: affordable housing, environmental stewardship. These aren't hidden. These aren't unknowns. So I feel like when we get a proposal that is kind of contrary to 2 of our 5 priorities, it makes it very difficult for us to look upon those without this sort of conversation happening in the context of a council meeting. I would ask, not just you, but all applicants to be mindful of our priorities, because we will certainly make a better effort, and I'll talk to my colleagues on the council as well, to be mindful of the idea that a negotiation at council is very tough and doesn't help move the process forward. We want to make this easy, want to make this efficient, but at the same time, we also want to do our job in terms of protecting the character of the town and undergoing this responsibility in a responsible sort of way. That make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
See where I'm coming from? Outstanding.
Thank you, Councilman. All right, do I need a motion to continue this? All right, is there a motion?
Yeah, I move to continue public hearing 2 and 3 to September 27th.
All right, motion Mahaffey,
I'll second it.
second Stallings. Any further discussion? All right, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion passes.
Could I just ask the town attorney, so the public hearing was open, I don't recall if it was closed, we've continued this item, does it need to be renoticed?
I believe it was closed,
It was closed.
and so it will not be a public hearing.
When it comes back, okay, gotcha. Thank you.
All right, thanks, everyone. All right,
You guys make one more comment to staff on the topic of what we just discussed. Well, the first is, I really would like to see some recommendations from staff on how we can implement a condition around EV chargers and garages. I know we don't write building code, but let me know what we can do. That discussion, I'm not an expert, I'd like to hear some ideas. The second, concerning the Environmental Review Board, some comment was made that bothers me a little bit. It was noted that we implemented the majority of the recommendations. And I think that strictly may have been true. But of the recommendations, there's 20 of them. Some are super cheap, like you put a sign up. And some are like you put a pet waste station. And other ones are like make solar panels. There's a significant difference in the utility of implementing various items of the recommendations. So what I'd like to see in my world is, or in my head rather, is the Environmental Review Board actually analyze and give a recommendation based on the subset of recommendations that were agreed to. Does that make sense? Is that possible for them to actually, like, we get a vote from the planning board on their recommendation? Can we get a vote from the Environmental Review Board on whether, yes, I did a good job, no, it's good, you know, and getting that information, I think would help us give context here.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to unpack there and talk about.
Yeah, let me talk to staff. We have a meeting tomorrow to discuss both the affordable housing conditions as well as the EAB conditions and bringing in someone to help us with those discussions. So I can follow up with you after we have some conversation about next steps, but I don't want to give you a response right now. I'd like to talk to staff.
All right, thanks.
Fair enough. Okay. All right, we'll move on now to public hearing 4 and 5 together. Annexation 737 and rezoning case 22CZ 14905. Lauren Stoudemire. Good to see you tonight.
Good evening, everyone. Good to see you. This is rezoning case 22CZ14, as well as annexation number 737 for 905 Wimberley Road. The property is located in this general area outside of our ETJ and in Wake County. The subject property is a total of 7.21 acres and is located east of Wimberley Road and west of American Tobacco Trail. The property is vacant and heavily wooded. The property is proposing to annex into the town for town services as well. The property is currently zoned Wake County Residential ADW. The adjacent zonings are to the north, east, and south, Wake County Residential ADW, and to the west, Plan Unit Development Conditional Zoning. The applicant is proposing to rezone the property to residential agricultural conditional zoning. The 2045 land use map identifies the subject property as rural density residential. The proposed rezoning to residential agricultural conditional zoning is consistent with that land use classification. The applicant conducted a neighborhood meeting on May 16th, 2022, and a copy of the neighborhood report is in your packet. A full list of the proposed uses and zoning conditions can be found on page 2 of the staff report. The applicant is proposing a single-family and accessory apartment. Besides the residential architectural conditions we typically see, I also wanted to point out zoning condition number 15. Number 15, the minimum front building setback shall be 55 feet from the current right-of-way. The Environmental Advisory Board held a pre-application meeting for this rezoning on April 20th. The zoning conditions suggested by the EAB are listed on page 3 of the staff report, along with the applicant's response to each condition and whether the applicant provided the conditions or not. A letter of impact from Wake County Public School Systems was not requested for this rezoning because the proposed rezoning does not allow the property to be subdivided to increase the number of homes. The proposed rezoning is reasonable and in the public interest because it will permit one single-family residential dwelling consistent and compatible with the surrounding area. In addition, the proposed rezoning will allow the property to connect to town water and sewer. Planning Board heard this at their August 8th public hearing and unanimously recommended approval with the conditions as proposed by the applicant. Planning staff can recommend approval with the conditions as offered by the applicant. I'm happy to answer any questions as well as our applicant that's in the audience.
Thank you, Ms. Stoudemire.
Thank you.
Wonderful job. All right, any questions for? All right, thank you, applicant.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. Evan Bost. I'm here from Bost Custom Homes representing our applicant who is the property owner, and happy to answer any questions you may have for me.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Boss?
Short and sweet, okay.
All right, doesn't sound like we have any questions for you. All right, we'll go ahead and thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
We'll go ahead and open up public hearing for comment for these two items 4 and 5. And Mr. Boss, you signed up for that, so you don't have any additional things to talk about? You're good? All right, therefore we'll close the public hearing for comment, and it's back to council for discussion.
So I'll start. and I watched the planning board meeting. What's unique about this property is this is an exempt site plan, or an exempt subdivision, or whatever what it's called. So it's, well, it means there's, if I'm correct or wrong, they don't have to conform with the transportation plan. They don't have to commit RCA, is that right? There's some RCA in this site?
No, sir, for a single-family house.
Right. What's interesting about this is that this is in that rural density area of Apex, which I don't think I've seen many come through and actually conform to rural density. That's pretty interesting. And I'm supportive of, one unit, great, this is gonna be an awesome site. My only real concern, in regard to the public interest here is to the east, that's the tobacco trail, right?
Yes, sir.
So to the east, this property, I looked at the map, it slopes to the southeast. So I don't know what the plan is for the property. We don't have much control being an exempt site plan, but they could, in theory, you'll clear the whole thing, you put in a basketball court, you put in a swimming pool, you put in, a bunch of stuff, a bunch of impermeable surface. There's no retention pond because exempt. So all that runoff then does go directly onto the tobacco trail. And to me, that seems potentially problematic. And this is something that could maybe be addressed if there were conditions or some insight as to how the property will be used, or conditions to, address that somehow. I don't know. But my concern is for the tobacco trail and how development of the site. I'm not saying you're planning on clearing the thing and paving it over, but I just want to acknowledge if you did, that would be very bad for the tobacco trail. To the west, we have Wimberley Road, which I understand is on our transportation plan, is being expanded. If this were a subdivision, we would be able to require dedication of the right-of-way. We're not able to do that here because it's an exempt, because it's one single-family home. So that does represent a future cost to the town to acquire that property from the future property owner, which would have been which is unfortunate. So had this been subdivided and built, 7 acres, they could put, well, I guess at the density it's at now, you can't do much with it. But if it were to eventually be on our long-range plan set to low density, which it might be the next revision or going forward, you could imagine putting, 10, 14 homes here, and then at that point would require the dedication. Or actually, they might even be required to expand the road at that point. Again, future cost to the town because it's this method. So that's those are my comments. And I don't know, do you have any response to any thoughts on those issues? I know some of them came with the planning board.
Yeah, sure.
As to what we can do there.
Yeah, some of those things didn't come up at the planning board, but yeah, I'll just say that, this is what we do day in and day out. We develop, single-family homes on single tracks like this. There is an impervious surface cap for the property. It gets recorded with the property, so we can't, pave a parking lot. There is a max impervious surface, and I'm not sure in the town of Apex how that's addressed if you go beyond it. I know in Wake County, I don't think you can do site-specific BMPs like a bioretention pond to expand your impervious surface, but the homeowner, their intention is to retain a private home site, so they wouldn't want to be building anything terribly close to the American Tobacco Trail or Wimberley Road. They really want to, be more in the center and preserve. There's a zoning condition to preserve as many large specimen trees around the perimeter as possible. So, yes, if this were a subdivision, I think there would have to be a full environmental calculation of what the runoff pre and post development would be, and making sure that we're not adding to that. In this case, we're not going to be generating enough excess runoff to really present a problem. There's going to be a vegetative border that will absorb it. And really the slope where the house is going, which is more on like the northern half of the property, it's 15 to 20 feet above the American Tobacco Trail. Because of the way, the railroad just cuts through the land, doesn't really care if it's a hill or not. So Tobacco Trail is relatively flat, and the site slopes to the north. But I will just make another comment on the discussion they are having on the previous one, that just my opinion here, as kind of a new urbanist, but putting the onus on the private sector to make the development pattern more environmentally sustainable is, in my opinion, kind of a long path to get to where you want to go. Where you want to go is to change the development pattern to prevent the problems, as opposed to trying to require solar panels on a single-family home when everyone that lives in that neighborhood is going to drive every single day. They're going to use fossil fuels regardless. So, you know, more mixed-use developments, more walkable communities. That's the focus, in my opinion. Not, you know, electric cars, not requiring solar panels. But that's all.
All right, thank you so much. Any other questions for Mr. Boss? All right,
All right, thank you.
more discussion?
I will just say that I recognize the concerns that Mr. Mahaffey has with this, but I mean, those are, we'll have to address those if there's a request for rezoning at a later time. As of right now, single family home, it is what it is.
True.
Could I ask what's the buffer on the east side?
For a single family home, a buffer is not required. I believe.
Even, I mean, single family to single family wouldn't be required, but single family to the use on the east is conservation, or what's that actually zoned, the tobacco trail?
I have Amanda to confirm for me. It's rural residential, or it's protected open space. We're double checking.
I guess what I'm saying is I appreciate the intention of the owner to not encroach and to protect that vegetative buffer. Is a conditional zoning give an opportunity to put that in there if it's not actually required by the UDO?
The typical buffer along the American Tobacco Trail, sorry, I don't know if that's allowed, is a 50-foot type A buffer. And I didn't realize it wasn't offered, because I was just saying it should have been a condition. That would have been a standard ask. So I don't know if you're willing to do that. Sorry.
So you're saying that is a standard condition, Ms. Ken, the buffer?
If it were a subdivision, it would be required by the UDO, but because it's not being subdivided, staff should have asked for the 50-foot type A buffer along the American Tobacco Trail. We don't want people, viewing houses right next to the trail.
Okay.
Is that something you'd be willing to offer as a condition?
For the live streamers, I guess I should come up here. The property owner's not here, so I don't think I can make that determination. But I'll just say that the property owner wants to retain privacy on this site, so I don't think it's going to be a concern that they're going to encroach within a 50-foot. Plus, like I said, there's like a 15 to 20-foot drop where we're planning on putting the house, and that slope eats up a lot of that, what would be in the 50-foot vegetative buffer anyways. Even if you were standing right next to where the house is, you're looking at a mound of earth that the house would be up there. So I don't feel comfortable making that, but I feel very confident in assuring you that it's not going to be an issue on the site.
Here's my concern, is this might not be an issue for this owner, but if it is sold in the future, there is no telling what different owners may do. And that's the biggest concern, is we want something ongoing, especially with the tobacco trail, which is very highly used, to make sure that field that we're looking for is preserved out there. So I would want to see that type of commitment before I would support it.
I would too.
Well, right now we haven't planned exactly where the house is going to sit yet, but we have a pretty good idea. it is in that northern half of the property, which is way up there if you're on the tobacco trail. I mean, you would have to get a 10-foot ladder and walk up their private property to get a glimpse of the development. To build anything in the southern half of the property, to my understanding, is either going to require another rezoning, because this is just one single-family home that we're asking for. So we're planning on putting the single-family home in the northern half. To build anything in the southern half, that I agree, if there was a home in the southern half of the property, it would potentially be more visible from the tobacco trail.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Is it possible for you to get in touch with the owners and let us know? Maybe we can delay it till the end and then vote?
I'm good with that, if
Would that be a
colleagues
possibility?
do.
It would be. They're not land planners, they're not surveyors, they don't have, like most average people, they don't have a great grasp of what a 50-foot buffer means in real life. So I would feel somewhat uncomfortable asking them for that decision tonight without explaining, showing them on a map what that looks like, or showing them actually on their property what it looks like. I could ask, but I don't think it would be like good counsel, me being a steward of their property.
That's fair.
Okay,
So,
so what's in front of us right now?
What's the setback? What's the building setback along the tobacco trail?
It depends on the orientation of the house. If it was a rear setback in RA, it'd be 25 feet. That's just the building setback.
Okay.
And then accessory structures can be closer.
I would have thought it would have been more than that, low density area, but they if I can look at it on a map quickly and kind of get an idea of how big that slope is coming up from.
would you feel better to have this
tobacco.
continued, have that discussion, and then come back at a later point?
No, I would not. No.
Okay.
Let me, if that's gonna be a deal breaker, then we'll get it done tonight.
How long, go ahead.
For me, it is a deal breaker, so.
Okay.
How long do you think it'll take to get in contact with them?
Pretty quickly. I just, again, I wanna understand exactly what that means for where they're planning on putting the house. And
So can we move it to the last public hearing then?
You get removed, be moved to the end, you all right with that?
Here's the deal. All right. That now is a bunch of scrubby pines. So yes, we probably are. I don't know if it's within that 50-foot buffer, but there is an area that we would want to beautify, because it's honestly, it doesn't look good enough for what we're planning to do for the property. So I would hate to put a buffer in place that then becomes this ugly old pine forest from a farmer.
You can plant up a buffer, right?
Depends on the.
Can you clear there's some really
I think it's
scrubby.
50-foot A. I mean, the planning staff could speak to it, but you could clear it and then plant it back up to A standard. Just,
Don't know how the conditions worded, because
You can work the condition that way. It could be worked.
So that the
However, it's a condition, if you want.
the vegetative buffer can be a landscaped.
Do a type A standard, yeah.
I would prefer you carved out just the one area if it's gonna be a condition for there, because I think having the existing conditions, I mean, it addresses the runoff concern I had earlier. If we have a thick existing vegetative buffer there, it's gonna, make sure, help protect the tobacco trail.
Okay.
Because as it stands, if you call it, you can clear the whole thing. Maybe they just want a big yard. It doesn't necessarily have to be, a basketball or, whatever. Just grass. Water will run off at a quicker rate than it would,
If I could make a request, to ask the presenter to work with staff and then come back, and so that you can get a good understanding of what council was asking for. And then you can also call the person that you're representing. I think that would.
You're not asking for a continuation, but just.
No, for you to
move
come back
along
at the,
for now?
yep, to move it along for now, so we
Yeah.
can get, and then you can come back at the end of the rest of the presentations. I think that'll give you an opportunity to talk to your person and to staff.
This is the homeowner right here.
Okay. All right. All right, we'll move on to public hearing number 6. Diane Ken.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is Annexation 739, the Triad Education Services, also known as Triangle Math Science Academy. This is in our far western jurisdiction off of US 64. As you can see, it is just a sliver of their overall property. Their main property is under development currently, but they are requesting this property be annexed so that they can add it to their project. You see where the existing corporate limits is. Staff does recommend approval.
Thank you. Questions for Ms. Ken? All right, hearing none, I'll go ahead and open up public hearing for comment. No signups tonight. We'll close public hearing for comment. It's back to council for discussion. Or a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Motion, Mayor Pro Tem, to approve.
Second.
Second, Councilman Gray. Any discussion? All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion is unanimous. Move on now to public hearing 7.
Here, this is rezoning case 22CZ10, the Calix Senior Living PUD, which is a Cobra Pod Amendment. The project is in our northern part of our jurisdiction. It is south of Jinx Road, adjacent to 540, and is currently vacant. As you may recall, the Cobra Pod was originally approved in 2020 and designated the southern tract as non-residential. The intent of this pod amendment is to allow a congregate care living facility on this tract. The UDO defines a congregate living facility as that provides care for more than 24 hours and provides food service. If the amendment is approved, the parcel will stay a plan unit, development conditional zoning, and all of the zoning conditions from the Cobra PUD would apply. The 2045 land use map classifies the subject property as mixed use, high density residential, office employment, and commercial services. The proposed amendment is consistent with the classification. The subject property is currently vacant. The applicant conducted a neighborhood meeting on April 26th. A copy of the neighborhood meeting is included in the staff report. A full list of the proposed amendments is on page 3 and 4 of the staff report. To highlight, the applicant is requesting the following changes to the PUD. The maximum building square footage for tract 2 shall be 58,000 square feet. The residential density will be 11 resident rooms per acre. The setbacks for non-residential shall apply. The applicant is requesting a reduction in the landscape buffer on the east along 540 from 100 to 50 to allow, which is allowed by the UDO for non-residential uses adjacent to limited access highway. The applicant is requesting a 20% reduction or 0.8 parking spaces per resident room in their required parking for congregate living facility. The UDO currently calls for 1 parking space per dwelling unit. The original PUD did show a stub connection to Dominic Court, and the applicant is requesting that this no longer be required. There are no changes to the utility plan from the Cobra PUD. The applicant is proposing amendments to Section 8 for non-residential architectural conditions to apply. The predominant exterior building material shall be fiber cement. The building exterior shall have no more than 1 material color. No more than 20% of the building facade may consist of EIFS material. EIFS and synthetic stucco shall not be used in the first 4 feet above grade. The Environmental Advisory Board held a meeting with the applicant on April 21st. The zoning conditions suggested by the EAB are listed on page 4 of the staff report, along with the applicant's response to each condition. The planning board held a public hearing on August 8th and unanimously recommended approval with the conditions as proposed by the applicant. Approval of the rezoning is reasonable because the amendment is consistent with the mixed-use land use classification and in the public interest because it will provide an opportunity for a needed use and will serve the surrounding areas. I'm happy to answer any questions, and the applicant is also here to have a presentation.
All right, thank you, Ms. Laughlin. Any questions for Ms. Laughlin? All right, thank you. All right, applicant.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. I was planning to be brief, and given the amount of work you guys have done tonight, I'm going to be even briefer. So my name is Bob Steenson. My address is 4901 Waters Edge Drive in Raleigh. Calyx Senior Living is a local company founded in Raleigh in 1996. We are owners and operators of assisted living facilities here in North Carolina. Unlike traditional developers, Calyx Senior Living, or Carillon is our company name, we own the facilities that we construct and we operate them. So when we come to a community, we're here for the long haul to be part of the fabric of the community for the future. The proposed project would be a fully licensed assisted living facility. Calyx has Certificate of Need beds to deploy in Wake County. For anyone listening or on the network, an assisted living facility is a residence for the frail elderly. It provides senior citizens with assistance with activities of daily living. And those are dining, bathing, dressing, mobility, medication management. It's not a nursing home and it's not a medical facility. It's a residence for the frail elderly. One wing of the building will be secured for memory care, to care for those suffering from Alzheimer's or other forms of dementia. We have been seeking a location in Apex for some considerable time now because the need in Apex for this type of service is great and growing. And I can give you, now that the new census data is out, I can give you some numbers on the senior population in Apex. In Apex, currently, there are 1,769 seniors age 75 and older. That population is projected to grow by an astonishing 32% over just the next 5 years. To serve that population in the town of Apex, right now, there are 144 licensed assisted living beds and only 44 licensed memory care beds. So our proposed project would add 94 licensed beds to the total to serve the residents of Apex. With me this evening are Pam Porter, president of TMT Landscape Architects. They are site designers and land planners, and Marcos Vidal, who's our vice president of business development. We have worked really closely with planning staff to prepare this application. And I know we had early discussions with a number of the council members when we began the process. So I'm here to answer any questions, and we certainly do appreciate the assistance of staff in getting us to this point. If there's anything in particular that I can answer for you, I'm willing.
So how many beds total?
We will likely license it for 94.
Okay, and then how many of those are memory care?
We will probably place 40 beds in, or 44, depending on how the building ends up laying out, in the special care unit.
I appreciate the use that you're trying to bring to Apex, because I do know it's a real need. I kind of come back, as we may sound like a broken record with the Environmental Advisory Board.
Sure.
There were several conditions that you have not said you would be willing to consider, and I just wanted to circle back to see if you would consider any of those related to solar or with the tree canopy.
Sure. So this came up at Planning Board, and we honestly wanted to make sure that we were proceeding before we kind of dove too deeply into the conditions. And there were a number of them related to various aspects of landscaping, but so if you sort of lump those together, there were 8 Energy Board recommended conditions. The first of which was to consider a pervious pavement and an integrated irrigation system running off the stormwater control measure. I think we've addressed that by asking for the reduction in the parking area.
So none of the residents who live in this facility will drive. We've had facilities in North Carolina for 26 years, and in all of that time, maybe 3 or 4 people had a car who lived there. So we don't need all the parking that the UDO provides for. So we've already reduced the area significantly. There's another challenge with pervious pavement with this particular resident population. The surface tends to be rough and somewhat porous, and the resident population's primary activity is walking, but they shuffle. As you might have seen seniors, there's a lot of shuffling of feet. There was a state DHHS engineer who used to inspect facilities, and he never lifted his foot. His name was Charles Cox. He's retired now, but he never lifted his foot the whole time he walked around an assisted living facility. We called it the Charlie Shuffle. And he was looking for things that would trip residents. So that's why we didn't do pervious pavement. The landscaping package will absolutely exceed the UDO requirements. They recommend that it gardens, and we do have, gardening is an activity for residents. Their site plan will include veg trugs and other planting materials. The recommendation was to consider making the building solar panel ready, and it will be solar panel ready. We've included that as a condition to provide the necessary infrastructure to get, from the roof to the electric panel room going forward. We haven't at this point addressed installing an actual solar PV system, because unlike a residence, this would have to be a fairly massive system. And we haven't had an opportunity to design it yet. We certainly remain open to doing so and are looking at that because we are sensitive to it. The recommendation, in addition, was to consider timers on the building lighting and the pathway lighting. And there is absolutely a timer on the building lighting. The pathway lighting might be a challenge because the code requires us to keep a minimum of 1-foot candle everywhere from every exit door to the public way. And so I don't think we can dim it, but we're not overlighting it. This is, while it's commercial in nature, there's going to be plenty of resident bedrooms there, so we're pretty sensitive to the amount of light that we keep up on the outside. They recommended that we use full cutoff site lighting, and we will use full cutoff site lighting. All of our lighting on the building will be shielded. The recommendation was for a 3,000 K maximum color temp, and the answer to that condition is yes for everything that we provide, and if Duke Power will provide it, yes. And I can't speak for Duke. So I think we've endeavored to respond to the Energy Board's recommendations for this nature, for this type of facility, as best we can at this point. As far as the integrated irrigation system from the stormwater control measure, while that sounds like a good idea, I'm not sure this site is large enough to, and the stormwater it's not designed yet, so I have no idea if it's actually going to be a wet pond. It might be a bioretention garden or something of that nature, in which case there wouldn't be any water to use for the irrigation system. Does that sort of answer your question, Counselor?
Are you open to solar? Is that what you're saying? You are open to the idea, you just can't commit to it? Is that what you're saying?
We can't commit to it because it's not designed. We have no idea of the implication of cost, et cetera, but we are absolutely planning to prepare the building to be ready for it.
Thank you.
Other questions for Mr. Stinson? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll open up public hearing for comment. And the first speaker is Pamela Porter.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Pam Porter with TMTLA Associates, 5011 South Park Drive in Durham. Between Liz and Bob, I don't have anything else to add unless you have any questions. I'm the landscape architect on this project, so happy to answer anything you may have for me.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Porter.
All right, thank you.
Okay, all right. Lisa, you are, okay, so we're good. We'll close the public hearing for this item, and it's back to council for discussion.
I would like to say that, and I use this as a contrast to other presentations that we have. To me, this is one of those examples where we ask for consideration of the recommendations, and I really appreciate the applicant's thoughtful and articulate explanation as to what was considered and why those things weren't actually accepted. And to me, I think it's a great example of what, as a council, our job is to help use that reasoning in order to help further these sort of things to go forward. I mean, the idea of, we know why we want, pervious surfaces. We know why we want that. However, we've got a great explanation as to why you don't have that in this sort of case. And this, to me, is that sort of balance where we, as a council, show, all right, you know what? We have our priorities. We know what we would like to be able to do, but we also aren't just doing it with a lockstep of this is a requirement. We're looking at how the applicant presents the matter, how they've considered it, and if they've got a reasonable, rational basis as to why they didn't do it or why they didn't accept a lot of those recommendations, I appreciate that. So I'd like to say thank you to the applicant for not only stepping forward with something that's a dire need within Southern Wake County and within Apex, but for taking the time to consider the recommendations and coming up with an explanation as to why it's not appropriate in this instance. That means a lot to me.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would agree with that. As an occupational therapist who has worked with the elderly community for a very long time in CCRCs and ALs and independent living, you know, I spent most of my time working with people who had a lot of falls. And any of the areas that had impervious pavers like that, you know, that was a concern, and those were areas that we asked people to avoid whenever they went on their daily walks. So I appreciate the thoughtfulness that went into that. So thank you.
Okay, Councilman?
Yeah, I mean, in this case, it's such a needed use around town that, you know, what I really try to do is to look at the project as a whole and see as doing a net good for Apex. And we start, you know, right at the beginning, looking at, you know, a facility like this, and you get the data earlier. I didn't write it down, but there was a huge gap, a huge need for these beds, and so clearly, you know, it's going to be, you know, needed. And I guess I have one note that I want to bring up, but it's more to staff. It has to do with the parking reduction. It's come up a couple times, and I understand it completely makes sense here. Like, our parking standards set to number of beds. They don't really use parking, so really what you want to do the parking towards is your employees and you know, your guests, your visitors, and you've sized it appropriately. I completely support that. We currently, the amount of EV chargers we require in a parking lot is based on the number of parking spots. Okay? And this is a special case, but I'd like to see that decoupled, because every time this comes up, I always ask for, well, can we increase the number of EV chargers in relation to the initial requirement? I'm not doing that here, I'm just talking to staff. But so I think in the UDO it might be better if we just decoupled entirely the number of EV chargers from the number of parking spots, come with a different calculation, which is equivalent, so I don't have to bring that up every time.
We can talk about it. You brought this up before, we don't understand, so we'll need to talk about it.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Councilman.
Just thank you for your thoughtfulness and the comprehensive way you walk through that with us. I appreciate it, and I very much appreciate this need that will be coming to our town.
Thank you for choosing Apex. So is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Motion.
Second.
Tim? All right, second. Councilman Gray. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion passed unanimously. Thank you. All right. Ms. Loughlin, thank you.
Let me take a bit of a.
You ready to take one?
Yes.
All right. We'll go ahead and take a recess till 8 o'clock. Is that enough time?
huh?
We're gonna need to get you a TINS, we're gonna need to get you a TINS pad in order
What
to
are we gonna
help.
do with Councilmember Gantz? Is the mayor gonna get those?
We'll share. What are you talking about?
They're yours. Take them home. These are Mr. Gantz, right?
Oh, yeah, most
Take
definitely.
those home.
Oops, I'm sorry.
Those
We're
aren't-
back to
those aren't
session.
good for- Mayor, those aren't good for your pet. You
What's
shouldn't
that?
eat those.
I-
I'll
There you
take.
go, there you go.
She wants one too, it sounds like. All right, I'm-
Y'all having too much fun. All right, public hearing 8.
Okay, this is rezoning case 22CZ15 for Car Space Apex. This proposed rezoning is located in the eastern portion of our jurisdiction, at the north end of Pinnacle Center Drive. The property is just under 7 acres and is currently zoned Tech Flex conditional zoning. The proposed zoning is light industrial conditional zoning, which is consistent with the 2045 land use map, which designates the properties as industrial employment. The property is surrounded by non-residential development. The properties are also bisected by a 135-foot wide Duke electric energy easement, and there are town public utility easements on the east and west portions of the area to be rezoned. The applicant conducted a neighborhood meeting on May 16th, and you have that report. For the most part, the uses are remaining consistent with what's in the existing zoning, as in addition to the architectural standards that are currently applicable to the property. The primary purpose of this rezoning is to allow a unique form of what we're calling self-service storage facility, but it's really a place for people to store their vehicles and have co-working or office space in that space. We don't really have a use that allows this, and it's kind of a unique hybrid of uses, hard to define, hard to create standards for. And so the most similar use would be the self-service storage facility. So what you see in condition 7 are modifications to the long list of supplemental standards that we have in the UDO for this use, so that it allows the desired parameters that the applicant would like. In addition, the applicant has added 7 zoning conditions as suggested by the Environmental Advisory Board. The planning staff recommends approval of this rezoning with the conditions as offered by the applicant. The planning board at their August 8th meeting unanimously recommended approval. The rezoning is consistent with the land use map, and the rezoning is reasonable and in the public interest in that it provides flexibility for the use self-service storage facility that will allow the establishment of a use that is unique within Apex and that is also compatible with the surrounding uses and those anticipated on nearby vacant parcels. In addition, several recommended conditions from the EAB have been added that will mitigate the environmental impact of proposed development beyond what would be anticipated with development under the current zoning. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thanks, Ms. Box. Questions?
Just one question. So this is, because when I read the staff package, I was going, okay, it's not storage, but it's kind of storage and work combined.
Yes.
Okay.
It's both.
Okay, that helped me understand why we were kind of fitting this into an interesting wedge. Got
Yes,
it.
yes.
Okay.
Is there a similar type, something like this around?
Not within Apex, but within the greater Triangle area. I believe there is. The applicant can speak to that.
Okay. All right, applicant, it's your time.
Mr. Mayor, Council, good to see you guys. To answer your question, there is a similar establishment or setup in Raleigh. It's called Carolina Exotic Car Club. They have a section of co-working offices or commercial offices overlooking car storage. And then on the back side of the building, they've got garages for rent. So.
Yes, to add to that, my name is Chris Rakowski with TMT Associates, just the representing Car Space here. We got Jonathan Fifield, who's co-founder, and then Chris Harrell as well. So these guys are bringing this really unique vision here to Apex on this 7-acre lot here in Pinnacle Park. And it's a really exciting concept that really mixes co-working, car condos, and some other kind of event space that really kind of will provide a kind of vibrance for this area. And just you guys are going to host some pretty cool events, I think. So happy to answer any questions you guys have.
I do have a question. So, actually, two questions. First question, you're a Sabres fan, so I don't know why you're here. But regardless. Sorry. Exactly right. Exactly right.
Point order. Point order.
I'm nearly converted. I
think he's working on it.
Make your way along. Make your way along. But are you envisioning, is this going to be kind of like office space that's kind of car-centric, like, you know, for like car shows and stuff like that, or is this?
Golfers have country clubs and social clubs attached to the country club, right? Car guys, we got parking lots, and so we hang out in parking lots until we get kicked out of the parking lots, and people are tired of us loitering, and we're kind of tired of loitering. We are a members club, so you'll pay annual dues to be part of the club. Some of the benefits that we offer our club members, our co-working offices, social event housing, and then in this particular location, custom car condominiums that allow them to store and showcase their cars or other fine items.
Would they consider helping us out in the Christmas parade?
We would love to. For us, this is a passion project. I've been a car guy for as long as I can remember. I was either helping my grandfather build a Mustang or my dad build a Chevrolet, and being stuck in the middle of really great arguments of Ford versus Chevy. I always enjoyed the argument of Ford versus Ferrari, but I kind of went the opposite direction of American muscle. Although these days, if it's fast and cool, I'm happy to own it. For us, this is giving us an event center or a center that allows us to house a community that is not all-inclusive in the sense that if you pull up in a parking lot, right, and you pull up with 5 guys in a Ferrari, you're not going to go talk to the kid in the Honda, and the kid in the Honda is afraid to go talk to the 5 guys in the Ferrari. And it's not that the 5 guys in the Ferrari don't want to talk to the kid about cars. He's just afraid to go talk to him because they pulled up in a bunch of Ferraris. For us, this is really about building a community where we can start breaking those barriers and really open the network and the community up to like-minded people to help them inspire, to help them grow, and to help them, really build community inside of our space. I wouldn't be where I am today had I not, 18 years ago come into the car business and had someone take me under their wing and start introducing me to people and opening doors for me that wouldn't have been opened any other way. So that's kind of what this is for us.
Thank you for sharing your story. I do appreciate it. Now, as Mr. Mahaffey had mentioned to me, he's telling me that by making my comments about the Sabres, I may be losing some votes in the future, and I just want you to know I'm fine with that.
All right, anyone else?
You mentioned being inclusive. I'm curious, how do you propose being inclusive with your membership?
So we are offering different membership levels. So our entry level social member is going to come in at $99 a month, and that's going to be 35 and under, open to law enforcement, medical, first responders, and it's an entry level into the community at over 50% discount of what our executive members will be, and that's the people that want to partner and become a part of our community to be able to afford to come in without paying what everybody else is.
Looking at your pictures here on the Raleigh, it's nice. Definitely community. You have like coffee and cars, like those type of
What's
events?
that?
Coffee and cars.
Cars and Coffee, we work really closely with Rob Ayers in the Morrisville location. We've already spoken to Summit Church, which is the property directly behind us. about once we start getting into the construction process and start coming into the community, hosting our own Cars and Coffee Apex in that location, as our property really isn't going to be, as you can kind of look at just how messy our property is, the most conducive for that.
Right. Well done, okay. Any other questions, comments? All
I
right.
think this is pretty cool, man.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it's a very novel use, and you guys are pursuing your passion here, and I support you. I think it's great. Good luck to you.
Thank you.
Just one question.
Yeah.
You know, I'm gonna stay consistent tonight. Did you consider to make it extra cool by having solar on top?
We have, and we haven't ruled it out. It's for us, it's going to come down to a cost versus reward. Some of those programs that were mentioned earlier today are open and available to me as a homeowner and as a citizen, but not necessarily as a business. So some of those packages, as a business, we won't get the benefit back or the credit back the same way. So, but we are open to continuing down that path of looking at weighing out the benefits.
Yeah, I'll add, this is a rather difficult site to develop. There's transmission line easement, there's town of Apex sewer easements. The RETCA is already platted around the perimeter as part of the Pinnacle Park subdivision, and it's pretty steep. So, this is 7 acres, and I think we have the ability to develop about 2.5 to 3. So, yeah, we've considered it, and we'll continue to consider it as we move forward, but cost will be an issue.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. We'll go ahead and open up public hearing for this item for comment. No one signed up to speak tonight. We'll close it. It's back to council for more discussion or a motion. I'll take a motion if you want.
Move to approve.
All right, motion to approve, Gray.
I'll second it.
Second, Mayor Pro Tem. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Move on to public hearing number 9. Thank you all.
All right, the next item is various UDO amendments. The first item is to, amendments to the pre-application meeting and neighborhood meeting section of the UDO, so that to require applicants to provide information in the neighborhood meeting notification letter and during the neighborhood meeting about amendments to any long-range plans that are directly associated with the proposed rezoning or development, and to require that pre-application meetings with the technical review committee be held prior to the mailing of that neighborhood meeting notification letter, so that they have the information about needed long-range plan amendments before that letter is mailed. Otherwise, they would end up, it's really in their best interest, because if they don't discuss it at a neighborhood meeting, those long-range plan amendments, they would have to hold an additional neighborhood meeting. So if they have all the information up front, then they could do that once. And so these are the changes, just indicating the pre-application meeting held prior to the mailing of that invitation, the notice, and that the pre-application meeting be held with the technical review committee beforehand. Any questions on that amendment? Okay. The next amendment is to the supplemental standards for utility minor in order to remove the height limitation for water towers. So this primarily is, applicable to the town, and sometimes the tower needs to be higher to serve its intended purpose. And so we feel like 200 feet is, why 200 feet? So the only thing that changes when you go over 200 feet is the need to light the tower for FAA regulations for aircraft safety. So that's the purpose of this amendment. Any questions on that one? The next amendment is to the fences, walls, and berm section materials in order to allow the unfinished side of a fence to face an alley within the Downtown Festival Overlay District. There's very few places where this is going to be applicable, but in looking at our plans for our downtown streetscape improvements, we feel that this change would be beneficial to have. The next amendment is basically cleaning up. So when we added the use parking garage and parking lot public, We did not indicate or add it to the off-street parking schedule, which obviously it's a parking lot. The minimum number would be none. It's going to have parking, but we also require 2 bicycle spaces for commercial decks, so the same standard is proposed for public parking garage or lot. And then the change for recreation facility private is just for consistency in terminology. And finally, the last amendment is number 5, there's 6 tonight. The 5th amendment is to the dimension standards for parking lot design standards based on a recent change to state law, which basically says you cannot have maximum parking space dimensions. So we are just making it crystal clear that our standards are minimums. We're good. So we're just adding the word minimum in a couple of places so that there's no question. And finally, the last amendment is to the shared parking standards in order to increase the percentage of parking that can be shared for the use church or place of worship. So currently, in the evenings on the weekdays and evenings on the weekends, 30% we're saying that 30% of the parking is needed for that use. That's what this table is showing, is the percent of the parking that's needed for the use at different times of day. And that 100% is needed during the daytime on the weekend, which would include Saturday and Sunday. So we feel like understanding how churches and places of worship of different faiths operate, this is still probably requiring too much to be set aside at these different times of day. So we're proposing to reduce the amount that's required of this use to 10% in the evenings on weekdays and on weekends, and then clarify that 100% is required during the regularly scheduled worship service times, including 1 hour before and after such times. Otherwise, it's 10%. Any questions on that amendment? So planning staff is recommending approval of these amendments. The planning board unanimously recommended approval. I did want to point out in the ordinance for these amendments that we are proposing that the first amendment, requiring the long-range plan amendments be discussed, those changes be effective September 1st, because we have applications that are already in review. Otherwise, people would not be able to submit applications, would have to redo neighborhood meetings. And so we've written the ordinance such that any neighborhood meeting already conducted would be valid, and that the ordinance would take effect September 1st, which would be after our next round of new submittals.
Thank you. All right, we'll open up public hearing for this item for comment. No speakers signed up tonight. It's closed. It's back to council for discussion, lead to a possible motion.
Just want to echo my appreciation. I know it came up with the planning board for the First Amendment and how quickly you guys turned that around, responsive. I appreciate that.
Other comments?
I make a motion to approve.
Motion Stallings.
Second.
Second Gray. All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion passes unanimously. All right, back to public hearing 5. Mr. Boss, if you would come back up and. Yes, sir.
Thank you, members of the council, for staying late with me tonight. I appreciate it. So we have agreed to add the following condition to the zoning for application 22CZ14, a 50-foot vegetated buffer along American Tobacco Trail shall be provided prior to CO with the ability to remove 3-inch and smaller caliper pine and sweet gum and all invasive species to be replaced with evergreen screen trees every 25 feet where any existing vegetation is removed within that buffer.
Well done.
Thank you.
Good.
Thank you, and thank you to staff.
All right.
Any further comments or questions?
Any further discussion or comment? If not, is there a motion?
So moved.
All right.
Mayor, if I may remind folks that we're approving
Oh.
public hearing for the annexation and public hearing 5 for rezoning. With that motion, is that correct?
Okay.
Are you good with that?
I'm good with that,
Okay.
motion.
Thank you for the clarity.
I'll second it.
All right, we got a second, Mayor Pro Tem. Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed unanimously. Thank you. All right, new business 1.
Okay. You want me to speak to what's going on here?
Yes, sir, Council.
All right. New business 1, this corresponds to consent item number 8. Consent item number 8 is an ordinance proposing amending the Article 1 of Chapter 10, Health and Sanitation of Town of Apex Code of Ordinances. I pulled this for discussion because I believe this is a significant and meaningful update to how the town operates. And I wanted to have just a public discussion of it. I'm not saying I'm opposed to it. I'm just trying to sneak this on consent or something. I think this is a big deal. I think it's important. So with that, I asked that Brian, the legal, speak to it a little bit to how this was developed. I have some questions about kind of the content because it wasn't consistent with my understanding of how things worked before I saw it that I'd like to ask, and I have some questions to town manager too.
Sure. So this came up mainly because the public nuisances are already and have been prohibited in the town already, but that's literally the entirety of what it says is no public nuisance. But it doesn't give much definition as to what that means or what that includes. So what we found is zoning compliance officers have a difficult time going out to property and really fitting it into the ordinance to say what constitutes public nuisance. The other limitation on this is when it talks about trash and litter and stuff in yards, it links it to creating a fire hazard, and that's it. So if it's not a fire hazard, there's really no enforcement mechanism. So for at least for that portion, that's what the purpose of this ordinance was, to kind of flesh that out and describe what that would be, so anybody who looks at it would know exactly what is and is not prohibited.
And I also, so I read this 4 or 5 times, trying to wrap my head around the legalese, not being a lawyer. My impression, is it fair to say, would you agree that what this does is, A, it takes that, like you said, the general term of nuisance and expands page and a half of definitions into various nuisances. And also at the end, it actually defines a penalty, which wasn't there before, is that right?
There was a penalty, but it was, it did not define exactly what that would be and how it would be applied. Okay,
so the penalty today is, or with this ordinance, is $50 a day or something?
That's what it would be. Here would be $50 a day, yeah.
Okay. I guess the biggest question I had is, how does this compare to the ordinances of surrounding towns? Have you looked into or compared there? Can you speak to that a bit?
I have. I've looked through Cary, Wake Forest, Holly Springs, Raleigh, Durham, and everybody has something to this effect. Raleigh and Durham are much more in-depth as to exactly what's included. Holly Springs, Wake Forest include it, but they're a little more general. It's similar to what we were. Everybody prohibits the public nuisance. It's just the level of who defines what that means and how far you go into it. Whether it's just grass, it's just animal matter, whether it's appliances, and how much that's kind of discussed in there. But yeah, every community around here does have something similar.
So one thing I noticed in Holly Springs ordinance was they included by reference the county standards. Is that right? Right? Were I reading that correctly? It said you have to implement all the county health standards, right?
For county health, if there's a county health violation, yeah. Yeah, so they address that as well, if it's a violation of that.
Should we do that as well, or is that done in a separate?
I think that's covered in here. And if it's a violation of a county health standard, it's still going to be an issue. If it's a health and sanitation issue for the county, then it can still apply. If it's going to be an issue like that, that's their standard that applies for them. I think everything that we have in here is going to encompass that, what we're trying to accomplish.
I guess to me, it reminded me of all the times that we've had to sign on to a county ordinance, you know, in like 5 or 6 times the past year. So I guess, do we need to do that here? And I guess you're saying ours is fine the way it is. Okay.
No, we would not need to do that here.
All right. There's also this thing about, and Cary, I think, had this right of entry, they called it, where a code enforcement officer or someone could actually go onto a property to inspect the potential violation. And that's also something I noticed that we're missing here. Should we have that? Is that important?
Well, statutorily, I think we have that right. I think Cary defined it to be crystal clear. It's certainly something we could spell out in here if we felt we needed to. I think that's already an option that for code enforcement can do under state statute. So I think Cary's being extra careful about it. But it's certainly something I can look into if we want to be clear on that as well.
Just asking a question.
And just to be clear, when we're talking about, you know, some of the county ordinances versus what we have within our proposal here, it's just an enforcement mechanism. It doesn't mean that, you know, the county doesn't get to enforce their rules. And if we find like there's a violation of health violation that's basically encompassed under the county rules, it doesn't stop a resident from basically saying, hey, Wake County, deal with this.
Right, right.
And I just have one thing. This may be getting too deep into the matter, and I know there's more research that needs to be done, but my concern is the landlord-tenant with regard to the landlord is being fined, and they still have to go through an eviction process if the tenant doesn't comply. So I would like to know how that works out, because that's just more money on the landlord if they can't take action.
That is going to be the difficulty, is that we have to take the assessment. Our assessment is going to be against the owner of the property, who may have a tenant who's causing the problem. So we're going to post notice under this ordinance on the property so everybody's aware of it. And ideally, the tenant will take care of it, but our action does have to be against the owner. So if we take that action against the owner, it might be their way to resolve it would be to evict the tenant.
Which typically takes a...
It could take some time.
Yeah.
And it might not be successful.
All right. Would administration have the ability to waive those fines in some cases like that if they choose to, or always have to come to council to waive any fines after an issue is resolved?
As it stands now, council has that ability. Unless you want to make that change, I suppose it could be delegated, but right now that would be council's decision.
And if I could add, as part of the reorg, we are adding that code enforcement function. So that would be something that those code enforcement staff, that the code enforcement staff would be responsible for doing. So we would probably come to you to ask for that designated authority.
And that kind of brings up my second point. So the first thing I wanted to accomplish here was to just talk about it, let people know what we're doing. Second thing is to make everyone aware that, I mean, this is not trivial, right? We're gonna have to hire people to do this townwide against, into the term, like, effectively apply it across the entire town. Uniformly is gonna require resources that we're signing up to do by passing this ordinance. Just be aware, we gotta hire people, so.
Sure. Yep.
Yeah.
Which we did approve.
Which we did approve, yeah.
How much of a problem is this? I mean,
Trevor Johnson is one of the compliance officers. I'd let him speak to the conditions. He's seen probably be a better source.
Hello, council, mayor. We've got 2 or 3 main ones in town right now, but there's a lot of, we're kind of complaint driven. We ride around and we look for things too, but mainly we're complaint driven, and there's 2 or 3 that are really been a problem on almost a daily basis.
Is when we, complaints come in about whatever property comes in. I always say we don't have the authority to do much of stuff. I always assumed that meant we didn't have statutory authority, and that's part of what's surprising about this is I thought I've been telling people like, hey, well, we can't, we can't tell someone to cut the grass. Apparently we can tell people to cut the grass. I was not aware of that. So I guess that's my final question on the legal end is like, what's the statutory authority here that we're deriving this? And again, I want to reiterate, you're saying this is consistent with surrounding towns, and that's important to me, but it still seems just different than what I was under the impression of before I saw this.
There's a very general authority under North Carolina General Statute 168-193 that allows towns to abate public nuisances. But again, that's what it says, abate public nuisances. It doesn't say what that means. So I think it's been more or less left on towns to define what that is and how to do it. And our ordinance as it exists now kind of says the same thing. Anything that constitutes a public nuisance. Without more to explain what that means, it doesn't really tell people how to go about avoiding that or what we can do about it when it appears.
Could I assume that there's been extensive case law about what exactly is a nuisance, and that what we're writing here is consistent with that case law?
There has been a lot of case law, and it's arguable even today. A lot of case law it's case by case is what I would say. But yes, I feel this is consistent with what case law we can rely on.
All right.
and of course, we're talking about within town limits with this.
That's right.
It's not applied to the ETJ? Or does?
That's not how this is written. This is within the town limits. If you're asking if we could, I think we probably could. I've researched that more. I think we could possibly apply this in ETJ, but I probably want to look into that a little closer, if that's the interest.
Because I'm assuming, I would think the county ordinance would apply to ETJ, and I'm curious how consistent is that with ours, or your thoughts maybe about that?
So I've not reviewed the counties as closely. I think they have similar language. I don't think it's as in-depth as ours, to be honest, but I think they address the same issues. I think they just do it more generally.
And this is really where the donut hole thing comes in, where if we have an area where we've annexed everything and there's a couple properties inside and the standards for here happens to be, you know, public nuisance, but it could be anything. But when the standards are radically different, people are like, what's going on, man? Like, why do I have to do this and this dude's got whatever going on in his lawn? So.
Definitely good item for discussion, and is your motion to move to September 13th?
Well, I think that's what I want to talk to the council about. There's a couple ways to go forward. We could approve it tonight, as is. If you guys got some text changes you want to do, like we talked about a couple little things, or the delegating authority to waive fines, sounds like a good idea to me. We either do them or, have staff change it and come back next meeting. My initial thought, we could even set a public hearing, so if the public wants to weigh in on this, they could also do that. Or we could, approve it with a later effective date, and then there would be time in between for comment or modification if needed. But I asked my colleagues, what's your thoughts based on what you've heard?
I think having a public hearing is a good idea.
Same here. You ready to make the motion?
Yeah. Do we want to direct changes?
Can I just make a comment?
Yeah.
I would be interested in your research and input about how we deal with ETJ.
Okay.
And I guess you could bring that back at the public hearing. Is that yes?
I could bring it up, I could bring it back with it in the ordinance as applying to the ETJ if I think that can be done, if that's what you want to see. Or I could just bring it back as is and just give you the summary of how the law would apply there.
You all have a preference about that, colleagues?
I would prefer limited scope for now.
Okay.
And keep with the town limits.
Okay.
Our ETJ is actually pretty limited in size. A lot of what people think of ETJ is actually county area, so you still have that consistency issue where ETJ is kind of small and there's county area next to it, and
I'm definitely
So
city limits.
Okay.
yeah. But I would say if we could, when I make a motion, bring it back to, you had a change in terminology you prefer?
Right.
We change that, and also we put a sentence in about delegating authority to waive fines up to a certain reasonable level. Let's get that out of the way for the town manager or designee. We don't need to, I do like the ability of when someone comes into compliance to be able to waive some set of fines without having to have a public hearing and have them come forward to us and we have hat in hand and say, can you please? That's not necessary if they're complying, so I'd like that, put that in there right now. So I move that we set a public hearing for our next meeting, September. Do you want to do later than, do you prefer the 27th? Because again, we talked about the compactness of this, they're both really, really full. Okay, September 13th then?
Okay, okay, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Was that a thumbs up on the 13th? Okay. Set a public hearing for September 13th to consider the ordinance and consent item number 8 with modifications.
All right, this motion, Councilman Haffey, thank you, sir.
I'll second it.
Second, Mayor Pro Tem. Any further discussion? All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, passed unanimously. Updates, Manager Crosby. Not too bad.
Alrighty, well, I want to reiterate and say thank you to Vance, whose last day is August 31st. One thing that I told him last week is that Vance was one of the first people that I met. He's always very positive and upbeat and very energetic, and so I just really appreciate, one, him welcoming me to the town, but then also the service that he's provided to the town. So I wish him the best. And he was told, I think by Diane, that he will get younger now that he is retiring. So I wish him lots of fun in his retirement. Just a reminder to the public that Chatham and Hughes will be converted from a 2-way to a 4-way stop in a few weeks, sometime early September. A reminder that economic development is taking public input on their strategic plan, and they can access that on our website. And then last but not least, as a part of Welcoming Week, we are having an event at the Senior Center on September 10th from 10 to 1 called Darshana, and it is a glimpse into the Hindu civilization. So it's an opportunity for the community to come out and learn more about the Hindu community, and more information about that is on our website as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions for me before I leave? All right.
Any questions? All right, thanks so much for that update. Any other business? We did it. 8:35. Meeting's adjourned. Have a good evening, everyone.